Welcome to the broadcast. Tonight we'll spend the hour with actor John Travolta. He has just celebrated his 41st birthday, and he is experiencing a remarkable renaissance in his career following the release of Pulp Fiction. Married with one son, he has homes in Florida and Maine and flies his own jet. He is nominated for an Academy Award for Pulp Fiction. It was the television series Welcome Back, Kotter that made him popular. It was the film Saturday Night Fever that made him a movie star. It was followed by Grease and later Urban Cowboy. I am pleased to have him on this broadcast for a conversation about an extraordinary career and what some people see as a comeback, and he may not see it as that, but we want to talk about that as well. It's a real pleasure to have him back. Welcome back.
Thanks, Charlie. It's good to be here.
Happy birthday, too.
Thank you very much.
Tell me about getting this role. I mean, how did it come to be that Quentin Tarantino wanted you for this?
Well, in a nutshell, what happened was I had heard rumor that Quentin Tarantino, who a couple of years ago Heat was just building in Hollywood, had wanted to meet with me. And for an actor who had cooled off considerably, this was good news. We did meet and met twice, as a matter of fact. And there was no promise of a job from Quentin, but he just wanted to express how much I had meant to him as a film actor, and that I was part of his initial inspiration to be involved in film. And of course I was very appreciative of that. And then he went on to criticize some of my choices as well.
Yeah.
But all in all, I think that he was trying to remind me of what I had meant to film and what I could still mean to film if the right things were to be done.
Did you feel that? I mean, when he told you that, how much you meant to him, how much he thought you meant to film, what you could be, did it resonate with you?
Well, I think when he reminded me of Pauline Kael's affection for me and Francois Truffaut's affection for me, among others, it probably reminded me in a way that moved me as much as a kind of startling memory. It was a mixture. I felt a few things at once when he brought these things up. But bottom line, I guess it kind of rekindled the concept that I was considered a very good actor.
Yeah. Take a look at this. This is a clip from a one-hour conversation I did with Quentin Tarantino. Here it is. Why Travolta?
Well, I've always thought that John Travolta is one of the greatest movie stars Hollywood's ever produced.
Movie stars?
Yes. I mean, he's a wonderful actor, too, but I mean, like, he was a great star when he came out. And, I mean, people tend to, in fact, it's actually very scary how people tend to forget, because John Travolta was so huge when he came out. And it was like, and he actually shared something that only Brando had before him and only Julia Roberts has had since him, is that any part it was even remotely halfway conceivable that he could play was immediately sent to him.
Right.
And he did wonderful work in that time. And Saturday Night Fever, even wonderful comedy work on that TV show that made him a star, Welcome Back, Kotter. Right. Urban Cowboy, particularly from my money, in Blowout, the Brian De Palma film, which is one of my 3 favorite films of all time. His performance in that is great.
So there it is. Here's a guy who wanted you, who thought this was perfect for you, but he had to talk you into taking the role. Is that correct?
No, actually, it's not that he had to talk me into it. I had my own private ideas going on. It was that he had to talk Miramax into.
Well, I knew that he'd put his career on the line.
Oh, yes, he did, in a big way. And I thought he had far more to lose than I did, frankly, at the time. In theory, I could have very easily said, well, I've had my share. I had my shot at, a 20-year shot at things, and that's a pretty good run and all that, and I'm on my way. But for Quentin, his second movie out, fourth movie he had written, I felt he had a lot more to lose by putting me in the equation there.
So somebody had written that you didn't necessarily know that you wanted it. I mean, I know he'd gone to bat for you, but you had no reservation. When you saw the script and you saw Vincent Vega, you said, this is a great role.
I had a twofold reaction. Yes, number one, I did respond to the part that way. I thought it was probably the best part I had ever been offered. And the film, artistically, I responded to 100%. However, I was not sure exactly what the moral message was at the time. And through a series of investigations of having friends that I respected read it, and my reevaluating how I could contribute to the part and how I could change things according to my messages that I wanted to say, then I realized that, and querying Quentin on how certain things would be shot, that I could come up with my own, creative concern on it.
How did you approach it?
Which part?
The role of Vincent Vega. How did you prepare for it? How did you approach it? How did you want to change it? How did you make it your own?
Well, I did a few different things. Once I had decided I was on board, I realized that because I was not, am not an advocate of drug usage, and it's not a side of life that I'm familiar with, that I needed to do some investigation with drug addicts. So I basically chose a few kind of ideal archetypes of heroin users. And I sat with a kind of street heroin addict, and I sat with a kind of well-to-do heroin addict. And these were ex-heroin addicts, so they had their wits about them. And they were very, very articulate about the feelings, the phenomenons, and the reasons that they were to take heroin. So I felt that that was the area I needed to investigate the most, being that that was the area I had rubbed elbows the least with. And interestingly enough, I felt that my homework had paid off so well, because all that investigation I felt was on screen almost more than anything else, was the drug haze that was created. So that paid off in a big way. And just the idea of turning the part into something that might be a little more humorous. Yeah. My take on it was more black humor than it would be seriousness, you know.
How is it to work with Quentin? I mean, does he give you free rein? Does he come in because he's also the scriptwriter with a real strong sense of what he wants you to do and how he wants it done?
Well, he has all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, Quentin is by far the smartest and most knowledgeable filmmaker I've ever worked with, from all aspects. He's an actor as well, so he has a very distinct appreciation for acting and other actors, but also he has a vision, and that vision is half the battle. So I knew I was in great hands, and all I had to do was come up with the icing on the cake, as it were, you know.
Take a look at this. Here is a clip. Pulp Fiction. Samuel Jackson, John Travolta.
But you know what the funniest thing about Europe is?
What?
It's the little differences. You know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris?
They don't call it a quarter pounder with cheese?
Oh, man, they got the metric system. They wouldn't know what a quarter pounder is.
And what do they call it?
They call it Royale with cheese.
Royale with cheese.
That's right.
What do they call a Big Mac?
Big Mac's a Big Mac, but they call it Le Big Mac.
Le Big Mac. What do they call a Whopper?
I don't know. I didn't go on a Burger King.
We should have shotguns with this kind of deal.
How many up there?
3 or 4.
That's counting our guy?
Not sure.
So that means it could be up to 5 guys up there?
It's possible.
We should have shotguns.
Tarantino said that he knew if he could just get you on screen and had a good script, it would work. Did you have a feeling of what the stakes were in this film for you?
Yes. It wouldn't have taken a rocket scientist to figure that out.
Yeah, that's right.
But just the idea that it was the hottest script in town, that the kind of actors that were seeking it made me realize that I had to do something really different. And interestingly enough, a more calm feeling came over me, because I knew a frantic attitude would not handle solving this character. Yeah. But I thought, I want to exchange an abundance with this director, because if he was willing to do this for me, which I had never heard of happening before. You read about it in novels, of course, but you never...
Going to bat and going to the distributor and saying, without Travolta, you don't have me.
Right.
You know.
It's pretty amazing, to say the least, and I felt I had to give him back everything he gave me.
What did he infuse in you? What did he restore in you, in a sense? A sense of being an artist, a sense of...
Yeah, I would say that I've always had a lot of confidence as an actor because when you grow up in a house full of actors, it's very hard not to have a kind of inner sense of confidence. However, what Quentin did for me was rekindled the admiration for that acting that I hadn't had for a while. And I always needed to really do something special by giving me the kind of writing and role and surrounding me with actors that I had never been surrounded with before, the quality of. That package, as long as I had my wits about me, was almost unsinkable.
Yeah. There is, much has been written about what is called the comeback, and much has been talked about you and how your career was sort of somewhere else. And you obviously, it's true, and Martin Amis wrote a brilliant piece in the New Yorker, but other people have written about it. How do you see it? Or do you see it the way that everybody else seems to look at it? Is that all of a sudden there was this really remarkable actor of the 70s and urban cowboy of the 80s who had sort of gone away and was at peace somewhere, but wasn't getting the roles, was acting with dogs and a lot of other things. Is it a comeback for you in the same way it is, or is it view this as some other way?
I actually like Martin Amis's take on what happened. I thought that for a man that I had spent only about 10 hours with, I thought he had a most insightful view of what I was about, almost to, not an embarrassing point, but almost to it was acute, you know, his perception of me. And
what was it about his perception that rang true?
I thought well, there's so many parts of the article that I loved, but I kind of thought that it was really, when he thought I was a terrifyingly, what did he say, a terrifying achiever that had learned to be calm. He was 90% right. I've just, coming from an actor's family, I think that calm was learned early. So therefore, basically, I am an achiever. I just have learned through family efforts to do it with ease, but not give up the hope or the, feeling towards that.
But evidently, Quentin Tarantino said at one point, what did you do, in a sense, when you had those initial conversations? What did you do? Like, where the hell have you been?
Right.
Sort of, something to that effect.
Well, I never fought for parts and roles. I was part of, I think I grew up feeling that an artist never should do that for themselves. Rather, fight to do a good job, but not fight for getting a part. You know, I made an example with someone once where I said, well, you know, if you had other big actors at the same table with me and we were all vying for the same job, I would talk you into using them because I'm not comfortable. I kind of feel like I want people to have Quentin's view of me, where they just have such confidence in what I can do that there is no other person for that role, where if I had to talk you into me, I feel that I was behind in the wrong movie or something, you see.
You also, though, had turned in, I mean, you said he quarreled with some of the roles you had taken.
Yes.
Like what?
Well, I think he was referring to ending up in films like the Look Who's Talking series. Now, however, the first Look Who's Talking came at a very important, I mean, I needed that to happen, and I was very pleased that happened, and I think when he viewed the film, he felt differently about it. He was saying that, having not seen the film, but not identifying with, you know, speaking babies and dogs and things like that. And so therefore I understood the distant response to that movie, or those movies. But I think that he also was responding to things I said no to. You know.
American Gigolo?
Yeah, I mean, not that...
Officer and Gentleman?
Yes, and maybe that, not that he would have thought that those would be the end-all be-all, but at least saying yes to certain films would have been in a better direction. But on the other hand, you'd have to look at the logistics of it. I said no to to Officer and Gentleman, but said yes to Urban Cowboy. Well, I know he likes Urban Cowboy better, so therefore I couldn't have done both. You see, now Officer and Gentleman was a different thing because I was studying to be a jet pilot, and my life...
And jet school was important.
And jet school was personally important to me, so I chose life over a film.
Why is flying so important to you?
I don't really know, to be honest. I just know that it's so... it gives me a sense of objectivity and extroversion that often being an artist doesn't, because when you're an artist often you're looking inward, and when you're a pilot you're looking outward. And I really like the concept of looking outward, although when I'm in my element of performing I'm also looking outward, because you hit that zone where you're extroverted in your performance. But sometimes getting there is kind of introverting.
Yeah. Of the things you had done before Pulp Fiction, where had you felt that most? And would it be Grease? Would it be Saturday Night Fever? Would it be Urban Cowboy? Would it be something that would surprise us?
Actually, the Robert Altman film, The Dumb Waiter, it was one
Based
of
on
my...
Harold Pinter's
play was actually one of my peaks, because I got to be a Cockney hitman in a very well-written Harold Pinter play on screen with Robert Altman directing. And I felt like he gave me total freedom to be an actor at a time that was a very cool time for me. So that was one of the highlights.
I guess when I ask about the comeback thing, and then what I was curious about is this notion, because again, referring to Quentin Tarantino, he said that nobody has been any bigger star than you were. He referred to it there and talking about Julia Roberts and Marlon Brando and maybe James Dean, although he died very young. And he said, you know, Tom Cruise, as big as he is, would love to be as big as you were back then. Having lived through that, having experienced that, having seen those mountaintops, you know, did it get really bad for you, or were you sort of at peace about the lot you had drawn and the roles you had chosen and the roles you hadn't chosen and where it had put you before Pulp Fiction came along?
Well, oddly enough, I feel that I was at peace with it, because I'm one of these guys that feels causative over my life. So I was not in the frame of mind to blame or put responsibility on anyone else's shoulders but my own. So other than a short-ish period of time prior to the offer of Pulp Fiction is when and even then I resolved with, it was about that month that I had started Look Who's Talking 3, you know, and I thought, okay, maybe this is it, you know, maybe the offers, the good offers will no longer be around the corner, and maybe they're further away than they've ever been. But you've had 20 years of it, a good run in film, and, you know, maybe you've made some mistakes, but you've also done some good things, and you've changed people's lives, and if you have to say goodbye in this fashion, that's not so bad. And upon that thought, I got the call from Quentin Tarantino. So I've always managed to never get too extreme in my feelings, positive or negative, about the events that have happened.
Is religion a factor in that?
Well, certainly Scientology helped me get to be in a better place, a more sane or logical point of view about life, you know, where I could differentiate real disasters from conceptual disasters. You know, I always said...
A movie that doesn't work is not an earthquake
that's exactly
causes a lot of tragedy.
Right. It's a theoretical disaster or something. And I really can differentiate the two, and I wish often that others could as easily as I do. But it really helps me get through life. I guess it's kind of unrealistic for me to look at something going off the tracks in the art world as serious as, you know, a plane crash or something.
You choose to live in Maine and you choose to live in Florida. You don't choose to live in Hollywood. I mean, there is this thing about you, and I'm fascinated by the notion of, I mean, the glamour never appealed to you very much. I mean, the notion of being part of, you know, the sort of the flash of Hollywood.
Well, that's a very interesting way of putting it, because I think glamour appeals to me a lot, and lifestyle appeals to me a lot. It just so happens that that version of it is not the version that necessarily has weight for me. I mean, let me choose the right words, but I like lifestyle, you know.
Yeah. Meaning what? Meaning
good food and
you are a gourmand, isn't it?
Travel, and I love flying a jet and having a nice home and taking care of my family in a style in which is favorable to me. But I never correlated that necessarily with being equal to Hollywood glitz or something. I more correlated it to doing well would equal my having the means to take care of.
To choose the quality that meant something to you.
Yes.
Which was having the things you could do for your child, or the way you chose to live, and the kind of.
And also, you know, I never meant by, in the New York article that what I meant by humble, that the public doesn't necessarily need you to be humble. I don't mean in your behavior towards them. I meant in lifestyle, meaning like I think it's the American dream that if you do well, you have a nice car, or if you do well, you send your son to a nice school. I mean, I that's what I meant more by it than humble in behavior, you know, because I think that is a quality I like in people.
Do you think that the best years, I assume you must, when you look at Paul Newman and Warren Beatty and Jack Nicholson and others, some of the best performances have come after 40. You just celebrated your 41st birthday. Do you have some sense that you were entering another stage now?
Absolutely. I felt like my 20s and 30s were vamping for me to actually get old enough to have decent roles. I think that the other way I looked at it was, boy, I fared pretty well in my 20s and 30s to get the parts I did get. I mean, there wasn't that many other better opportunities in the roles I did choose. You know, I can count them. But in your 40s and 50s, 60s, and 70s, and even 80s, my goodness, the parts for men and women have much more depth and substance and weight. And you kind of have to vamp through those age categories to even get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
Let me take one more look at Pulp Fiction. Set this up for me and tell me your thoughts about it, because it is the dance scene with Uma Thurman. Just give us a sense of how you saw this whole scene, and because people draw interesting comments about you as an icon, ending up there with Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley and James Dean, and other people who have become icons in American life.
Well, okay, there's a few different things. One is that Quentin wrote this script, or had this idea for the script prior to my arrival in it. So therefore, any actor that had to do this part was indeed going to end up on that dance floor.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. It was totally a coincidence that the idea that, let's say, I'm an icon ending up in a room full of icons. I thought there was great humor in that as a byproduct. Yeah. But I don't know if that was necessarily planned. It was just kind of the way it ended up.
But everybody who's watching it with you, just to interrupt 1 second,
sure,
is thinking about Saturday Night Fever.
Sure, and there should be a waiter dressed up in my outfit walking by me, or at least in the Grease outfit, you know. No, I kind of thought that it was where it turned into art, because art, by many people's interpretation, is interpretive. And throwing me into this mix is almost like throwing an Andy Warhol you know, painting up there. It was strange, and it was interpretive and all that kind of thing.
Here it is. Roll tape. Take a look.
Want to dance? No. I do believe Marcellus, my husband, your boss, told you to take me out and do whatever I wanted. And now I want to dance. I want to win. I want that trophy. So dance good.
All right.
I'm here for a first.
It was a teenage wedding and the old folks wished them well. You could see that Pierre did truly love the mademoiselle. And now the young monsieur and madame have rung the chapel bell. C'est la vie, say the old folks. It goes to show you never can
Is that your best moment in this film, or is it some other moment?
Oh gosh, I think there are about 25 moments that I continually toss up as my favorite moments, but that probably is one of intrigue to various people because, you know, I'm having to degrade my abilities and act through the character's interpretation of this dance. And he's on heroin at that point, and he's resisting being on this date, and so therefore, you know, it's a character approach to a dance.
Yeah.
And that therefore it makes it intriguing. But oh gosh, I mean, there are so many moments that I continually debate with Quentin what are our favorite moments. But I love that whole sequence, first of all, from the heroin score to all through to the end of the overdose. I think is quite a cinematic feat, you know, for Quentin. And I'm very pleased with how it came out.
What makes him so good? Why is he the hottest director in Hollywood?
Well, of course, I mean, I don't have all the answers, but I can give you a subjective answer. And my answer is that he's really smart, and he is knowledgeable beyond anybody else's ability in film. I mean, you know, there's rumor that certain people know more than other people. Quentin really knows more.
Yes, he does.
Than other people do in film, because it's his whole life. There are no other interests. And that's quite a heavy thing. I mean, life is his interest, otherwise he wouldn't be so good as well. But I mean, film is it for him. You don't have him interested in sports or flying or,
right.
you know, I mean, film.
He doesn't have family, he's not married.
No, he's an only child and brought up by a single parent. And film became his life, and I don't think any other filmmaker quite had his history.
And does that mean he gave you insights into who you were and what you were about that no one else had? Because he at least understood it from looking at you on the screen.
He understood it in a way that affected him personally, but also he was a student of film critique. So therefore his favorite critics, to the likes of Pauline Kael, his favorite directors, Francois Truffaut, Scorsese, he knew how certain people felt about me as well as how he felt about me.
Because he'd read what they'd said.
Yes. And it agreed with him. It made him, there was a certain feeling that he felt that was similar. And to that degree, he had confidence.
I would assume that it makes, if you're an actor, to know that someone comes to the table with that, it makes you reach for the best that you have to give.
100%. I mean, you've hit it on the nose. I mean, when you have someone who knows all your best points, and then brings to the table and says, okay, now all you have to do is do what you know how to do, you go in with more confidence than if your mother were to be there directing you. You know what I mean? It's that
and not only that, he's delivered you a script with just great lines to deliver.
And
actors, as you said, that make an ensemble.
I mean, imagine getting to be with Uma Thurman and Harvey Keitel and Sam Jackson, Bruce Willis. I mean, I had never been surrounded by this kind of ensemble before. I mean, he was saying, look, I'm going to do for you what I've always wanted others to do for you, and since they're not doing it, I'm going to do it and even put my job on the line to do it. I mean, I've never heard of that kind of belief in someone. And so therefore, I'm an aware enough guy to assimilate that and say, don't mess up this opportunity to deliver the best you can deliver.
And how did you make sure you didn't mess up this opportunity?
Well, just by taking responsibility for my performance. And that's all any, I think, good actor should do is be willing to go all out and know when you have the opportunity to go all out. And knowing, and also, you know, Quentin really trusts his actors in the idea that he would rather allow you to come up with what you think the right choices are as that character. I mean, that's quite an unusual thing, and you would think differently in a lot of situations. But I mean, he trusted my decision with the hair. He trusted my decision with that unusual voice cadence that I chose. He trusted my decision with the walk and with the type of dancing. And he just went, he said, you know, this is your job, you know, so you do what you're supposed to do, and didn't question it and didn't squelch it. And so often you find yourself in films where directors are squelching you, and yet you think, well, why are you squelching me when this is what I'm supposed to do? I'm supposed to contribute here. You know, let me give you the details that I think might be effective for the part.
Yeah. My life is about learning how to bring you my craft. Give me a chance to give it to you.
Yes, and Quentin indeed allows you to give it.
You have said before, and I'm not sure which piece I read, maybe Martin Amos' piece in the New Yorker, that many times directors wanted you to overact.
Mm-hmm.
What did you mean?
Well,
they don't see the subtlety of
not not on the set, it was something I always had to fight, and because I trusted the camera, I always have, and I trusted my gift of transparency, so I would think a thought and it would show up on screen, but it wouldn't show up in either until they saw it on film or they were putting the film together. And some were more sensitive to it than others, but I would continually have conversations to the tune of, look, you know, I know you wanted me to do more there, but I think that you'll be pleased with what I've done, because when you see it, and for the most part, directors would trust that I...
Does that mean that you're better on film than you'd be on the stage, because somehow the performance even translates better?
I think I probably am better on screen than I am. I mean,
because the camera loves you, the camera picks up on it, the camera is at one with you.
I have a rapport with the camera that I actually am in love with. And although I had a lot of stage experience growing up in a theater family, I never felt like I hit home with a theater, even though I was continually hired to do theater. I never felt like I translated past the third or fourth row. And I'd be hired for big Broadway shows, and directors would always say, you know, John, could you just make that, you know, project more, make it bigger? And I never had the ability to really give my all to that art form. But I felt like film, I found my home there, you know.
What is it about a camera that loves some people and doesn't others, you know?
I don't know, to be honest.
I mean, you are one of those people. It just somehow... And maybe that parted with you, what, you know, that sense of what happened with you, those three films. I mean, Martin Amos, again, to refer to this piece one time too many, perhaps, you know, he looked at Grease and Saturday Night Fever and Urban Cowboy as a kind of trilogy on...
Masculine youth.
Masculine youth, or immature youth, or immature masculinity, I think is what it was.
Right.
You know? Do you see any of that, or are you just simply doing a role?
Actually, I saw it a lot more than one would think, being that two aspects of that trilogy I had set before me in a contract. So therefore they didn't come up haphazardly, and by the time I was finished with the last one, the third one was in view. So I kind of saw it as three different types of men, young men, that had similar but different consequences and situations that I could give three homages to. And indeed, I thought that was spot on. I mean, I can't get over this man's...
Martin Amos.
Martin Amos' his attempt on... I mean, no one so quickly ever got it as right as Martin did.
Yeah, but just tell me finally, before we go away from Martin Amos here, I mean, everybody's going to be buying this New Yorker magazine. It is this notion that he uses to end the piece of you. Take me back to the time that you're flying into Dulles Airport and you're not necessarily sure you are going to make it, which he uses as a metaphor for your career, an analogy for your career, because in a sense, you glide in.
Right.
You'd land it safely.
Well, again, I thought, well, why is he asking me about aviation so much? I mean, this is the New Yorker magazine, and I thought it's very nice that he is, because I love airplanes, and isn't this a great thing? But I mean, what's he getting at with all this?
Yeah.
You know, why is he asking me about the incident over Washington, so on and so forth? And then when he puts it together in this article, I love the analogy he made. But basically, what happened in a nutshell was I had unfortunately inherited a series of problems on the electrical system in the plane, and one of the most important aspects of that failure was this transducer rectifier, which I needed.
Transducer rectifier.
Which is a switch,
Right.
which activates the backup system to the AC electrical system, which then replaces the DC
Right.
electrical system and gives you everything, in theory. It's fairly complex, but that's what it does. And anyway, so that switch wasn't working that night, along with several other things, which have since been very much handled. And he refers to and I landed safely. And
what's interesting is your wife and son are
we're
on
in the
board.
back of the plane. And of course, I knew that this was life-threatening, but again, in a very calm fashion, which we're taught at school, these various emergencies. And I remembered getting a black cockpit, which meant that you've lost all your instruments and you're basically going on one single gyro. And I found a hole in the sky over Washington. I was en route to Maine, and I circled through the hole in the sky, which is what you're taught in the early days, if you're caught in weather conditions, and hovered over Washington, D.C. until I saw the monument, which then I remembered that National Airport was very near.
National, very near the monument,
and
exactly.
just came in and landed with no flaps, no reversers, no anti-skid, and came to a safe landing. But his remark on that was, like in this flight over Washington, John Travolta needed his transducer rectifier, and in his career, he needs his transducer rectifier, which is Quentin, in theory.
Yeah, well, that raises this question. I mean, will you ever be as good as you were in Pulp Fiction, because Quentin's not going to be there every time?
Well, I had always daydreamed that Quentin's and my relationship would reflect more like Scorsese and De Niro. And I keep on reminding him that, this is a great team, and we should stick together.
This ought not be the only thing we do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And he gets mad at me because he says, you keep on telling people we're never going to work together again. And he said, that's not true. You'd be top on my list if it were the right thing. It's just that it was so good for me. I'm savoring it, and I don't want it to leave my life at this point. But I'm sure that...
You say the 4 months since the release of Pulp Fiction, since you won the award at Cannes, has been the best time of your life?
Well, it's been about 9 months now, and
as happy as you ever been?
I think so, because you see, first of all, I'm married to an incredible woman, Kelly Preston, who offered a whole other dimension to my life that's amazing. And then she gave me the gift of this child, which, I could go on for another hour about him, okay? Yeah. So therefore, you've got a life that's a little more imbalanced, right? Then you segue into this opportunity that Quentin gave me.
It's almost Renaissance.
Yes, Renaissance, where this film takes off beyond anybody's belief. And then the accolades start to come in, the kudos and so on and so forth, and suddenly it just hasn't stopped. I mean, it's just skyrocketed and built like a storm or something, and it's so exciting because, 17 years ago, I thought when I got the nomination for Saturday Night Fever that, oh, well, hell, I'm 23, but if I do good work every year, I'll probably get one of these, every year.
Yes, they'll come every year.
And I had no idea how difficult these were to come by. And so 17 years go by, and I suddenly realize, I see.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of finesse and right things happening at the right time and people believing in you and the right material and the right actors around you. And it's a package that happens. It's not a solo act at all.
Yeah. For it all to come together. Let me take a look. This is Saturday Night Fever. Here it is. Take a look.
See how tall that bridge is? That bridge, that tower right there goes up 690 feet. They got 40 million cars going across there a year. 127,000 tons of steel is involved in that. The concrete there, they got almost 750,000 yards of concrete. That's right. The center span right there is 4,260 feet long. And with the on-ramps, and all together total, it's like something like 2.5 miles.
You know all about the bridge, don't you?
That's right. I bridge. You know what else? They got a guy buried in the cement.
Yeah.
Know how it happened? Well, they was working on it apparently at the time, and I guess they were pouring the cement, and he slipped off, you know, on the upper part of the bridge, and you know, fell in.
What a way to go.
I come down here a lot, you know. I get ideas.
Oh yeah, what kind of ideas you get?
I don't know, daydreams. You know, I daydream a lot.
What was it like for you after that film hit? I mean, you were 20, what, 23? 24?
23. What was it like for me?
Yeah, I mean...
Well, gosh.
Because Quentin talked about the fact that, you know, as I said, the Tom Cruise quote, I mean, no one, as good as Tom Cruise is, as much acclaim as he has, as many people as that want him in a film, it was nothing. As someone said, and I think Quentin said in the conversation I did with him, you know, everybody who had a part wanted you to play that role.
Well, I mean, it was overwhelming, yes. Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Would you handle it any differently? When you take Saturday Night Fever and Grease and then Urban Cowboy, would you handle any of that differently? Would you do it differently if you had any of that to do over? Not selecting moment to moment, which clearly you wouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
True. You know, given.
Right.
Right. And there were maybe some other things you might not have done. Would you do Perfect again?
Well, I would, because all the things about Perfect were right. It was a good writing team. Right. It was a good director.
Aaron Latham wrote Perfect, who had also written Urban Cowboy,
Cowboy,
or wrote the original.
Power kind of connection. I think Perfect I probably would have done it, because it was people that cared a lot about my survival as a film actor, and the intentions were good in that film. And I feel that even though certain films don't work out, you have to analyze the intention of and make sure that, you know, you agree with it, and regardless of how it comes out.
I guess when I look back on them, and I'm having all this conversation you've had with Quentin about who you are, what you've done, and you can't do it, and you have to make the mistakes you make to get to where you are now. Perhaps because of the mistakes and what you went through, you're a better actor in Pulp Fiction. Perhaps all of that made you what you are.
Oh, absolutely, because, you know, unless you live life and rub elbows with all sorts.
And go up and down.
Where's your livingness? What do you have to contribute as an artist if you don't have some life that you've lived? I mean, I could watch a bunch of movies with you and tell you who are the actors that have lived some life and who haven't, and yet they all might be very good. But I can tell you who's actually had some
And that's what makes the 40s and the 50s, in terms of your chronological age, much more exciting for you.
Absolutely. And for writers who write parts, and for people that you know, have life that they've lived. I mean, everyone is evolving by the time you hit 40 to have something to write about, you know, and even more so at 50 and 60 and so on.
I once had a college professor say he doesn't like for students under 30. See, he says that he somehow thinks for students of 18 to 22 to be reading some of the great classics, because they haven't endured enough pain and enough loss and enough ups and downs to really feel the full range of the emotions of deep sadness or deep, you know, of great joy. Now, a lot of teenagers would say, of course we have. We felt all those things in their own way, but I understand, you know, that there is a certain thing about living that makes you, you know, bring something different in terms of your own experience to reading things that you can identify with, and also to acting in it. When you go forward now, tell me why you chose Get Shorty.
Well, again, you know, Quentin was instrumental in that decision. His favorite writer is Elmore Leonard. Right. And Danny DeVito.
Play the role of Chili Palmer.
Chili Palmer. Yeah. And a lot of people think it's Elmore Leonard's best novel, and some even think that he's the best novelist there is today. So that is its own stat. I mean, you can't argue or debate that.
But did you have some reservation about doing it?
I said no to the project twice.
Why?
Because I hadn't read the book, and I only had read the first adaptation of the book, which was the script.
Yeah.
And
it didn't speak to you.
It didn't speak to me. And then Quentin and Danny DeVito said,
Yeah.
well, why don't you read the book and then reread the script? Well, I read the book, and I knew exactly what was missing from the script, so they rewrote the script to much more parallel the book.
And what was missing?
Character dialogue from the book that I felt was quintessential to the style in which Elmore Leonard writes.
Yeah.
And you could be missing a sentence or a word, and it's so subtle, but it's the life of those characters in an Elmore Leonard book like Get Shorty. Anyway, it was so successfully put back into the script that I felt that it was something that I could say yes to.
But did Quentin called you up, and Quentin said, hello, John?
In his very soft voice. When Quentin gets serious, you know, he gets very soft.
And what did he say?
He said, John, understand that you were offered Get Shorty. You know, that's one of my favorite books, he said.
Yeah.
And that's also, you know, that script I felt was the best adaptation yet of an Elmore Leonard book, you know. And I really love it, and I really think he'd be brilliant in the part of Chili Palmer. And why did you say no? And I went into...
And they go, well, you said what?
And I said, well, you know, I read it, and I haven't read the book, and, you know,
and
I read it, and I didn't... He said, well, this is not the one you say no to. This is the one you say yes to. Okay? This is not the... And he repeated, this is not the one you say no to. And I kind of chuckled because I thought, you know, it's the story of my life, you know.
Yes. See, now this is really scary now. You would have said no, maybe if Quentin hadn't called. I mean, yes?
100. I said no twice. So in the theory, he was my transducer rectifier.
Boy, you better make sure he's at the other end of the telephone. Now, what about White Man's Burden?
He did the same thing with White Man's Burden. He whispered to me after a photo shoot.
Same thing?
He said, John, I have to talk to you about something. And I panicked because I thought, well, what happened? Why is he getting in this serious tone? So I said, you got to put me out of mystery. You know, tell me right now what's going on. He said, well, it's, you know, it's not a big thing, but I read a piece of material, a script that I thought was great, and I think you would be great in it. And I'm not going to tell you anything about it, but go home and read it, and call me tomorrow and tell me if you don't feel the same way. And I said, okay. I said, you've got my, I'm peaked now.
Right.
He said, really? He said, it's too interesting to ruin the surprise of it. So I went home and read it, and in that case, I 100% agreed. I was really taken by it. I read it standing up, you know.
Yeah.
And he said, I see someone like Harry Belafonte as the other part in it. And this is after I agreed that I liked it. Yeah. And I went, oh, man, I love Harry Belafonte. I mean, we haven't seen him on film for years. I mean, isn't that the perfect idea,
This
you know?
is great so far.
So, indeed...
And there's a new first-time director doing it, yes?
Well, interesting, the Desmond Nakata wrote it, but he also wrote American Me and Last Exit to Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So he's a wonderful writer.
Oh, yes.
He really is great at writing. So he did a good job. This is his first directing film, which made me and Harry nervous. But on the other hand, we felt the material might elevate itself to make sure that even with the first time, and with Quentin's seal of approval of him and the material, I felt like, well, you know, I'm in good hands here. I'm going to go for it. And it was a little budget. I mean, we got, again, it cost me, like it did Pulp Fiction. I had to go into my pocket to do the movie, and I thought there's only so many movies I can pay to do here, you know. Yeah. And Quentin may find all of them, but you know,
what are you going to say when you really want to do something, and you are dead set that this is the best opportunity I will ever have? It is Pulp Fiction plus Get Shorty, and Quentin says to you, John, don't do it.
It'll be a precarious situation because I'll have to. Don't do it. This is the one you say no to, right? Well, I know that'll happen at some point, but fortunately, I don't ever have the attachment to almost any project that's that. Yeah. You know, and if I do, I'll celebrate the day because I want to have. I actually had a feeling like that towards this Ron Howard film that he's doing, Apollo 13.
Yeah, right, that's right.
I love that because of my natural interest in aviation. And that I really did want to be a part of, and I was upset that And Ronnie, although I spoke to him, he just didn't see me in any one of these parts.
And did you lobby for it, or at all?
I did make a call.
You
and
made
it was
a
like
call.
one of the very few calls I've ever made. And I just said, you know, but I mean, the fight was as long as 15 minutes, and it was like, hey, you know.
Now, what you call him up, Ron Howard, up, and you say, I love aviation. You know, Ron, I love it.
Well,
and
I love
know
that script.
something about it.
And I know something about
plus,
aviation,
I love the
yes.
script, you know, and I bring something here because.
Yes. And as soon as I sensed that.
He said, no, John, it's not for you.
Well, he said that, yes, you're right about both those things.
Yeah.
And he queried me about certain aviation things. But when he said, well, I don't know if this one will work out, but maybe, you know, another one. I knew that was pretty much over.
Yeah.
And
now, are you disappointed, or are you?
I was terribly disappointed, but that's where another actor would go for the fight.
Yeah.
And that's where I need my Chancellor's Direct Fire to come in and back me up and make it go right. And I don't do that well, and I don't pretend to do it well, and I don't have a lot of interest in fighting for myself. I'll fight for my family, I'll fight for my religion, I'll fight for what I believe in. Yeah. But when it comes to fighting for scripts, I really do need someone else to be in there fighting for me. And I'll deliver the goods. I just am not good at. I'm like some old Russian artist that likes to just have it all done for him.
When you now began to think about it, I mean, we're out of time. We spent an hour together here. But when you think about it, those people who've influenced you, your parents, were they both in theater, show business?
No, my mom was a director, an actress, drama teacher.
Right.
And my dad was an athlete of even great purport. He was in the Hall of Fame in New Jersey. He was an athlete. So they were both performers in theory, but Mom was the only kind of, artist type.
It's great to be 40 and have somebody come into your life like Quentin has, who seems to have great judgment and great concern about your welfare.
Oh, he does.
And a sense of who you are. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
It doesn't. And every time I talk, I swear to you, I have to fight the tears every time I talk to this man, because I am continually moved by his interest, his care, and it doesn't stop at Pulp Fiction. That's what floors me. I mean, it floored me before. It floors me even more now. I mean, he called from Stockholm in the middle of our getting all these accolades and awards, for Pulp Fiction, to tell me that he screened a Blowout for 70 people in a big theater who had not seen it on the big screen and only had seen it on tape. And he went on for 30 minutes about that performance, which is 15 years old. I mean, he's a unique man in this sense.
And so are you. We haven't seen each other since the early 80s. It's just great to see you after some 12 or 14 years. Real pleasure to have you here on this broadcast and to see you again, John.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Good luck with the Oscar.
Thank you.
John Travolta, our guest here for this one-hour conversation, nominated for an Oscar in Pulp Fiction. Thank you again. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.